sometimes controversial, always politically incorrect, and pro-life without exception, without compromise, and without apology. It's the Pro-Life America podcast with your hosts, Sarah Waits and the president of Life Dynamics, Mark Crutcher.
Again, welcome to the Pro-Life America podcast.
Hello, everyone.
As you heard, that was the voice of my worthy co-host, Sarah Waits. I'm Mark Crutcher, president of Life Dynamics. Sarah, we had a setback in Kansas.
Yeah.
It actually is the first major battle in the states
since Roe was
overturned.
Yeah.
But let's not read too much into it.
No.
Remember, this is the state that tolerated George Tiller.
Now, for people who don't know who George Tiller is, give a Reader's Digest version of who he is.
He's one of the 5 most notorious abortionists in the history of this battle, known for his late-term abortions, and actually had a crematorium at his abortion mill.
Yeah.
We had a situation years ago where we were doing a man-on-the-street kind of thing right in front of the abortion clinic, and the people that were there were showing where ashes from the babies that he was burning were falling on the protesters and the picketers on the sidewalk.
Ugh, so eerie, very reminiscent of Germany.
He was a disgusting individual, wound up getting shot and killed. But anyway, I think the good people of Kansas will be given other opportunities. This is not a final thing by any stretch of the imagination in Kansas.
No. I mean, look at how long we've been doing this. We're not going to be like, oh, okay, well, we'll go home now.
We're going home. It's all over.
It's over.
And I want to make the point that I've made many times in the past. When we have a victory or when we have a defeat, things are never as good as we perceive them to be and never as bad as we perceive them to be. We've had defeats in the past. And to me, this is like a football game in which one team scores first. Well, somebody had to score first.
Yeah.
And
we just prefer it would be us.
We'd prefer it to be us, of course. But remember, in football games, the first team that scores doesn't always win. We've got a lot of victories ahead of us, so let's not get overly despondent on this. Do we wish we had won? Obviously. But we're going to continue on. And we've had worse defeats than this many times in the past, and yet we still wound up with a miracle on June 24th in which Roe was overturned. So don't get discouraged about that. Anyway, we're going to talk about China a little bit here for a minute.
Because as we know, there was a very eventful trip where Nancy Pelosi was going to China, despite the Chinese government not wanting her
threatening to shoot down an airplane. Does anybody really believe that these fools were going to shoot down an airplane with the United States Congress nuisance on it?
It would be a big risk because that would be basically a declaration of war.
It would be a declaration of war. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
But in all this talk about China, we decided to talk about China's child policies and
especially as they relate
demographics.
To abortion. Yeah.
Yes. And we've done shows before talking about the population decline. And probably one of the worst countries to suffer this, besides the United States, has been China.
Yeah.
Because as we know, for years, starting around late 1970s, I think it's 1979, they implemented a one-child policy.
Right.
And the one-child policy, for those who are not real familiar, was enforced by what they called the National Health and Family Planning Commission. If you had more than one child, there was punishments. It was often fines or forced abortion. Civil servants and employees of government-affiliated companies or organizations risked losing their jobs. If you couldn't pay the fine, your child was never registered, which meant that they didn't legally exist.
We covered this back in the old days of Life Talk. We had actual video of them. They had abortion vans.
Yeah, they would drag a woman into a van and take her somewhere.
They'd go to the house and pick her up, and at the force of a gun, at the point of a gun, would abort her child.
The National Health and Family Planning Commission spokesman, Mao Quan, said the agency's work had reduced the number of births in China over the years by 400 million.
Yep.
China's birth rate has declined swiftly over the past 5 years from 12.4 births for every 1,000 citizens in 2017 to 7.52 births for every 1,000 citizens in 2021, the lowest in 60 years. So it's really not any surprise that they're having a population decline. Now, I should note that in 2013, they expanded to 2 children in some cases, and in 2016, everybody got 2 children. But because of their continuous population decline, despite their increasing the child policies, it was discovered that in 2021, the statistics show that there was only a net population growth of only 480,000 babies.
Which is negligible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a drop in the bucket. And so what they did in 2021 was they increased the 2-child policy to a 3-child policy.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure how many Americans heard or knew about that, considering everything that was going on. So they now have a 3-child policy. All the demographics data that the WHO and China's National Bureau of Statistics, they were expecting a decline around the 2030s. But it's already happening now, about like 9-10 years earlier than they expected.
Well, it might be tempting to say, well, this is a nation with over 1 billion people in it. Do they really need more people? When you have a declining population, your economy's in bad shape.
You have less workers, for one thing. But there was something else I saw in these articles I was reading about it that was really interesting. A Thomas Duesterberg, a senior fellow who specializes in economics at the Hudson Institute, said population growth is one of the most important sources of economic growth because as the workforce declines, so does the rate of innovation.
Right. Well, if you just limit it, say, to the United States, and one of the examples I use is 2 large metropolitan areas, Detroit and Dallas-Fort Worth. Detroit used to be one of the premier cities in America. I mean, it was...
Oh, absolutely. It was the place to be.
Yeah, it was a neat, exciting, innovative place with over 2 million residents in the city of Detroit.
It's a ghost town now.
Now it's down to just nothing. And I'll tell you, some years ago, a friend of mine and I went to Dearborn, Michigan, to the Henry Ford Museum there.
Which, if you haven't ever been there, guys, I've been, and I can tell you, it's an incredible place to go. You should really go check it out.
In Dearborn, Michigan, and Greenfield Village right next door. It's really, really a neat place. But we decided just to drive around Detroit and see if it was as bad as we had been told. And actually, it was much worse. I heard people there in Detroit saying, we've become the Beirut of America. I mean, you just drive down the street and there'd be upside down cars in a field burning on fire and nobody's doing anything. It's just there.
Blocks and blocks of abandoned houses and schools.
And Danny and I both said, you know, if we had a flat tire right now or car trouble and had to get out, we're dead. We got out there as quick as we could. Meanwhile, Dallas-Fort Worth is just booming. Well, one of the barometers for that is population. Detroit's population went from 2 million to 1 million. Dallas's population, Dallas-Fort Worth area, the metropolitan area, went from about 2 million to right now we're right at 8 million.
And the reason why we lump it together, if you're not from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, if you're not familiar with Texas, it feels like almost one city.
It is one city.
Unless you're from the area, you can't tell where one city ends and the other one begins.
Well, that's now true about Denton. I mean, we're the northern part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We're basically a triangle with Dallas and Fort Worth.
When you get outside Denton towards the north, you can kind of see it. But
get out
from
in the
the
country.
south, yeah.
Yeah, but when my wife and I moved here 51 years ago, that's amazing, Denton was just a sleepy little college town. It wasn't really part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And now it's Dallas-Fort Worth and Denton are basically one city. I mean, it's solid.
Well, I remember when Frisco wasn't really much of a city at all. Like, it was just a development. And now it's one of the fastest growing cities in the nation.
And one of the most affluent. But when you have these declining populations, you have declining economic opportunities.
Yeah. It's not just declining population, but as a result of that, aging population. It says in China, in about 25 years, 1/3 of China's population will be retirees. That's a huge, huge deal, especially when you're talking about any government assistance or programs, especially in the case of the United States. All of our programs like Medicare, Medicaid, I mean, you go down the list, they all require a sizable population of younger, healthier people who are not drawing out of the system, but putting into it to support the fraction of people who are taking out.
Well, you think about the fact that I got my first job, official job, when I was 16. That'd have been 1964. And I've paid into the Social Security system forever.
Yeah.
And all the other government programs. And the theory is that money is in return to you when you're older and retired.
That's the theory anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
But that requires younger people paying into the system who are not, like you said, not taking anything out.
It also requires not treating those funds like a piggy bank to fund other things.
Well, that was always the argument, is that money goes into basically a lock box, as Al Gore once called it. And the money's put in there to be taken out later on. But what happens is Congress goes in there and steals that money and drops an IOU in the box. That is literally what has happened.
Yeah.
So now what we're doing is we're having to tax people to put money that was already put in that box one time Now we've got to overtax people like you to replenish that fund.
Just for people like you. That's not even for people like me.
That's right. And so we're replenishing money that Congress stole over the years. And these are all functions of declining populations. Everybody needs to see a movie, a documentary, you can get it online, called Demographic Winter, about what's happening with populations around the world. And it's owing to birth control and abortion. That's what's caused this whole thing. And it's a scary situation, and it's affecting us right here in the United States. And it's already affecting us. It's not something we can look to for the future. It's already here.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because when I was doing some reading on China's population and their gender imbalance, they were talking about the terms that they would use to encourage people to not have as many children or to have more children. In March 2018, when the new health commission took over for the National Health and Family Planning Commission, officials said the phrase family planning would disappear from the ministerial lexicon. So they're getting rid of the terms family planning.
Right. Well, I said this is affecting America right now. The main place where we see this affecting America is in the immigration issue. And we're very alarmed about illegal immigration, these people pouring in from other countries, as well we should be. And the question is, why aren't we passing federal legislation that says if you hire one of these people, you go to jail? That would end it, because they come here to get jobs. So that would end it effectively overnight. So why aren't we doing that? And the answer is, what the Democrats have figured out, what the liberals have figured out, is that if we don't have people to fill these jobs, especially jobs at the lower end of the socioeconomic level, we are eventually going to expose the fact that legalized abortion has decimated our economy, because we don't have enough workers to fill these jobs. For example, even in a place like Dallas-Fort Worth, we have a burgeoning population of people moving here. There was an article in the Dallas paper last year that says we're short 10,000 construction workers alone, just in that industry alone, 10,000 workers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
And what this immigration thing is about, and don't let anybody fool you, it's easy to look at this and say, why aren't the Democrats on board with stopping 7,000 people a day coming into Texas illegally? 7,000 a day is the current rate. Why aren't we stopping that? And it's because we don't want to stop it. We need those workers.
Well, it's not just the workers, it's the money that they bring in.
It's the money that comes in with them.
Because a number of people, some may be getting paid under the table, but a number of illegal immigrants will use Social Security numbers of people in order to get jobs. And so they'll be putting money into the Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid system that they can't pull out.
Right. They're not going to get that money back. The IRS, even, that's such a large number now. They've assigned a name to it. It's called the earnings suspense file. And that's money that's put into Social Security or into Medicare or Medicaid that can never be taken out. And that's pure profit for the government. The main source of that is people who are working in the United States illegally. You know, we can have this debate about whether these people coming in are taking jobs that Americans don't want or do want and can't get because these people will work cheaper. That's not the issue. The issue is that these people are taking jobs of Americans that don't exist because they were aborted. Illegal immigration is tolerated by the left in America because it keeps from exposing abortion as the cause of economic decline.
Well, in China, there's been a number of articles talking about their concerns over the labor market because, as I said a minute ago, their population is aging. Not only that, but they've had the one-child policies. But there's also another issue that China is experiencing, which is the gender imbalance that they have over there. And it says, with the male population exceeding the female population by more than 30 million. So there's 30 million more males than females.
Yeah, again, I want to encourage everybody to go out there and order a copy of that documentary, Demographic Winter, because it'll show you exactly what's going on and exactly what the cause of it is. Again, this goes back to the issue of the stupidity of mankind, is that we think we can engage in some sort of evil practice and it won't have any effect on us. It'll only have effect on our victims. That's not true. Abortion is starting to have a blowback in America. And even some leftist and pro-abortion researchers are starting to acknowledge that we're experiencing some economic problems, and we're going to experience more of them in the future because we've executed so many children.
especially as all the governments around the world are more interconnected and dependent on each other. It's not just China who's going to be suffering from their economic problems. I mean, it's going to have a tidal effect on all these other countries, especially when you consider how much goods that China produces and exports.
Well, the scary thing to me is we all know that China is wanting to become the world's dominant culture, and they're militarily committed to that. I mean, they didn't shoot down Nancy Pelosi's airplane. But the fact that they even thought about it or brought it up, you know, if that was ever brought up in the United States, somebody's going to visit here and we're going, or some other country going to visit Puerto Rico. The federal government would never in a million years even introduce the idea that we might shoot down that airplane. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they would even bring that up is very, very discouraging. And these people are on the move. And we're seeing it in a lot of different areas. They're buying up all this land in America, buying up land next to military bases. It's a scary situation, and some of it is being driven by these population issues in China.
Yeah.
They're hell-bent on becoming the dominant culture in the world.
I don't know if many people know about the genocide that is happening against a segment of the population, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but it's called Uyghurs. They are Muslim ethnicity.
Yeah.
But they have what they call re-education camps. And Australian Strategic Policy Institute found evidence in 2020 of more than 380 of these re-education camps in Xinjiang, so just within one province, an increase of 40% of previous estimates. They also estimate that there were almost 23,000 residents, or more than 12% of the adult population of one country, were in one of those camps or prisons in the years 2017 to 2018. In addition to that, China has been forcibly mass sterilizing Uyghur women and separating children from their family, and also other things to control their population.
It's mind-boggling. But again, it's something that we've talked about many times on this show. When you distill these social problems down and you start peeling the onion back, at the core of it always is abortion. When you get back to it, you always get to abortion as the core cause of all these problems. And we're at the very beginning of these problems here in the United States. They've taken a foothold here. But I'm confident we will turn it around. I think the overturn of Roe gives us the opportunity to go into these states. And yes, we just lost the first battle in Kansas, but that's just the first battle. It's not the war. And I will point out that in World War II, when we went to Africa, the United States went there to fight Rommel. We got massacred in the first battle, first time out against the Germans. The American soldiers were just stacked up like cordwood over there. And it was an eye-opening experience for the American military.
Oh, yeah.
And particularly for Eisenhower. But we did eventually win.
We did.
So we took...
It took a bit.
It took a while. But the fact is, just because we lost the first battle doesn't really mean that much. We just keep fighting.
You just keep fighting.
And there'll be other battles in the future that we will certainly win more than our share. Until one day we've ended this thing. In the meantime, there's a move we kind of touched on, I think, on last week's show or the week before, related to the definition between abortion and miscarriage.
Yeah, so I was on the internet, on Twitter, and there was this article that popped up that, of course, pro-lifers were talking about. And the title is, "Why do we talk about miscarriage differently from abortion?" Well, because they're different.
Because they're different. The biological processes may be no different. What's different here is the motive behind them. Intent behind them. If somebody's accidentally shot cleaning their gun, that's different than somebody shooting their spouse with a gun. But for the victim, the biology is the same.
Yeah.
Well, in abortion and miscarriage, the biology is the same too. But not the intent of the people who carried it out.
But for the, quote, quote, the reproductive rights movement, there has been a push that pregnancy loss and abortion are
on the same plane.
On the same page. It's around the same thing. In fact, there's a line from this article. It says, "The line between abortion and pregnancy loss has always been blurry. But over the past few decades, the anti-abortion movement has forged a cultural bright line between the two experiencing, promoting dueling narratives of, quote, quote, bad mothers who voluntarily cause fetal death versus, quote, quote, good mothers who grieve unpreventable pregnancy loss."
Can they not see that they are different? Yes, they can. It's a political move on their part to try to equate them.
Speaking of political moves, Right after that, they follow up with, these narratives are often steeped in harmful stereotypes. Black and poor women are often blamed or even prosecuted when they miscarry, while white women with economic means are assumed victims of a bodily process outside their control.
Show me one of these black women that's been prosecuted for a miscarriage. Bring her forth and let's talk to her. They can't do it. But what they're trying to do here, and this is very subtle, and they've always been the masters at doing these things very subtly and behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. In this equating of miscarriage and abortion, they're trying to push the point that an abortion is a naturally occurring phenomenon. Mm-hmm. That's what they're trying to do. And
they'll even call it induced miscarriage at times.
Well, we talked about George Tiller earlier. Mm-hmm. That's what he used to say. He said, we're going to manage this pregnancy through an intentional miscarriage. That's an abortion.
They know that the word abortion carries a stigma, so they try to lump it in with something that is completely outside of people's control that nobody stigmatizes.
Well, literally, what Tiller was trying to do was create a mindset among women that said, I'm going to go to the local women's clinic, and I'm not having an abortion. I'm having a miscarriage.
Yeah.
I'm having an induced miscarriage. And that puts miscarriage and abortion on the same level. They're not on the same level. They're two entirely different things. And it insults the experience of women who've had miscarriages of very wanted babies. For example, my wife.
Yeah.
We had several miscarriages before we had our daughter that died from a condition called Meckel-Gruber syndrome. And then later, of course, we adopted Sheila. But it downplays the experience of women who've had miscarriages.
It's a slap in the face.
Yeah, it's an insult to them to put them on the same level with a woman who says, oh, this baby's going to interfere with my career or my education, so I'm going to have my baby killed. That's not the same situation at all. Well, but the abortion industry is trying to paint that picture.
To the credit of the person who wrote this article, I will say that they do mention in here how the pro-choice side is known for trying to make it seem like women don't ever suffer any emotional or mental effects from miscarriage or abortion, and that completely causes issues for them because of that. And how women are likely to suffer loss and grief from those things.
You know, when our daughter was diagnosed with what they originally thought she had a thing called Turner syndrome. Turned out she didn't. She had something called Meckel-Gruber syndrome.
Which is even more rare than Turner syndrome, right?
Meckel-Gruber syndrome is one of the most rare things in the world. That's why they don't even study it. They don't look for any cures for it. But when we were told that my daughter had Turner syndrome, which is not fatal, which causes some problems, but it's not a big life-altering problem for women that have it. Only girls get Turner syndrome. But anyway, obviously we would not have had an abortion no matter what the situation was. So we chose to go ahead, and she was born, and then it turned out she had this thing called Meckel-Gruber syndrome, and she died. And I've been confronted over the years by people who say, well, let's say a woman is told that her child has a condition that's incompatible with life, and she has an abortion. How is that different than what happened with you? Your baby still died. Yeah, but I didn't cause that death.
It's like the people who ask you, say, wouldn't you have preferred to abort the child so that way you didn't experience all of that
The answer is
grief?
no.
You still experience the grief. That's still the loss of your child.
Absolutely. But the fact is that if you intentionally kill your child because you're told it has a condition that's incompatible with life, you then live the rest of your life knowing you murdered your child. We didn't do that. We didn't take that path. So yes, we can still grieve over Jackie's death, but we don't have the guilt that would have been associated with having intentionally killed her.
In this article, it's disgusting, but they say, today, though abortion and pregnancy loss are generally perceived as two different things, at least in part because of anti-abortion strategy. Decades ago, the anti-abortion movement realized that it could weaponize grief after pregnancy loss to suggest the callousness of abortion and to promote the concept of fetal personhood.
Unborn children are persons. I don't care what these people say.
Well, we're not weaponizing grief.
No, we're not.
We're not suddenly saying, wait a minute, suddenly there's a huge difference between abortion and miscarriage.
Yeah, so anyway, just be on the lookout if you're out there in the field when these people try to equate miscarriage with abortion.
One of the ending lines on this article says, the abortion rights movement needs allies. And the pregnancy loss community, which is also suffering greatly without abortion rights, could be a formidable one. They are going to make this a bigger thing as time goes on. Right. Just you wait.
Yep.
They are going to try to use women who have miscarried to help carry legal abortion through.
Yeah, they're going to try to use women who could not help losing their child to support women who choose to lose their child. And that's two totally separate situations.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's all I got. You got anything else?
I have a small announcement, and that is that we have a new People of Choice website. If you have not seen it, you need to go check out peopleofchoice.com. We've got a slightly new look to it, new comment systems, rating, all that kind of thing. And of course, a lot more content and more categories. So I really encourage you to check it out and share it with your friends. People of Choice shows the world what the media refuses to show, which is the true nature and what the pro-choice movement really looks like.
And you need to see what kind of people you're associating yourself with when you call yourself pro-choice. These are your cohorts. These are your comrades right here. And, there's an old saying, we use it on peopleofchoice.com. Your mother said you'll know by the people you associate with.
Mm-hmm. By the company you keep.
By the company you keep. Well, go on this website and see these kind of nitwits that are on there. And some of the stuff on there, we can't even describe because it is so disgusting.
Yeah, I can tell you, as one of the people who helped curate the content for this website the first time and then going back and filling in stuff later on, I can tell you there are some truly disgusting things. And there's things that, I couldn't even make it. I wouldn't have made up. Like, nobody would buy this. Nobody
would buy into this, but yet these people do. It shows you what kind of people we're going up against.
Sarah Silverman auctioning off her used pad.
Right.
Or used tampon. I don't remember which one it was. Used.
But and by the way, that's mild compared to some of the stuff that we wouldn't even discuss here. But
no,
it's disgraceful. Anyway, you need to go watch that. Go through the whole People of Choice website.
If you can make it.
If you can make it through the whole thing.
There's like 68 pages.
And when you come out on the other side, you're going to have a much more realistic view of the kind of enemies we have. Anyway.
If you like this episode, make sure you leave a review and follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform.
And don't forget to support Life Dynamics. We need your help to continue and some of the projects that we're working on right now. Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight.
We're here to win.
Because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.